Payan will join us to discuss what unfolded yesterday and overnight in Minneapolis and what could happen next. I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman.
And I'm Doug Miller, guest hosting today. We'll also talk with Houston's newest city council member, Alejandra Salinas, about her new job and her priorities for the new year at City Hall.
Plus, Dr. Debalina Sengupta of the University of Houston's Energy Transition Institute will tell us how we can improve recycling in the United States.
Also, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or a text at 713-440-8870. Email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org and clicking on the big purple box.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. In Minneapolis, protests continue for another day over the death of 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good, who was shot and killed in her vehicle by an ICE agent. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the agent shot her in self-defense, something local and state officials say isn't true. And speaking in New York just now, Noem said agents yesterday were just doing their job and talked about President Trump's overall plan to oust people in the U.S. illegally.
President Trump and his law enforcement officers that are entrusted to protect the American people will every day continue to keep America safe. Operation Salvo is just the beginning of a broader and a much more sustained effort to go after not only transnational criminal organizations and networks, but also illegal criminal aliens throughout the country.
She's deployed some 2,000 ICE agents to Minneapolis. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison.
The real problem here is the decision from the chief executive of this country, the president, to escalate ICE agents in Minneapolis and all over the country. We've seen this in LA, Portland, Illinois, and it has done no one any good. And now it has cost somebody their life.
Speaking there to NPR's Morning Edition. Amid the political uncertainty in Venezuela following the U.S. ouster of President Nicolas Maduro, President Trump says he's spoken with a leader of neighboring Colombia. NPR's Deepa Shivaram has more.
The call between Trump and Colombian President Gustavo Petro comes just days after Trump was criticizing the Latin American leader, accusing him of making drugs and selling it to the U.S. On Sunday, Trump even seemed open to the idea of U.S. intervention in Colombia. He said it was a, quote, great honor to speak with Petro and that they spoke about drugs and other disagreements they've had. Trump says he invited Petro for a meeting at the White House soon. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
The House is expected to vote today to restore subsidies for people paying for their health insurance premiums under the Affordable Care Act. NPR's Sam Greenglass reports a bipartisan Senate deal is gaining support.
For weeks, House Republican leadership refused to allow a vote on the subsidies. So 4 swing district Republicans joined with Democrats to force a vote using a maneuver called a discharge petition. A procedural vote yesterday attracted support from 9 Republicans. Boosters of the subsidies have hoped that success in the House would recharge bipartisan negotiations in the Senate. Here's Republican Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio.
So we're in the red zone, but that does not mean a touchdown. It could mean a 95-yard fumble.
The emerging Senate deal would extend the subsidies for 2 years and allow people in the second year to opt for funds in a health savings account instead of a subsidy that goes to the insurer. Sam Greenglass, NPR News, Washington.
And you're listening to NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. The Houston City Council approved a $30 million demolition program yesterday to address more than 2,300 blighted buildings across the city. But the vote was split, with 7 council members voting against the measure over concerns about the funding source. News 88.7's Dominic Anthony Walsh explains.
The $30 million comes from the city's Stormwater Fund, which holds $166 million. Mayor John Whitmire's administration says inspectors will prove each blighted building causes stormwater issues before demolishing it under the program. His office shared the specific criteria with Houston Public Media. It includes whether a building is in a floodplain or near stormwater infrastructure. Councilmember Abby Kamen says that covers most of Houston.
I mean, we have just done what appears to me a massive catch-all.
Some of the money could come back to the fund. When the city demolishes a building, it places a lien on the property in an effort to recoup costs from the owner. I'm Dominic Anthony Walsh, News 88.7.
John Lindsay, the longest-serving county judge in Harris County history, died Wednesday morning at the age of 90. Ed Emmett, one of Lindsay's successors, credits him with modernizing mental health care in the county.
To put it succinctly, he was one of the first people who said, mental health's just another health issue. And so rather than have it stigmatized like it used to be, he tried to coordinate an effort that would get people the help they needed.
Emmett also credits Lindsay with putting Harris County on a sound financial footing through the creation of the county toll road system. Lindsay was elected in 1974 and served for 20 years, initially as the sole Republican on a commissioner's court dominated by Democrats. Houston Rodeo is announcing its lineup of performers tonight. The rodeo has already announced there will be 20 performers this year. Country artists dominate, but the rodeo will also have pop, rock, and R&B performances. Houston Public Media will have the latest when the schedule is announced. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello, Houston. Thanks for joining us today on Hello Houston. I am joined by...
Well, as anyone can see if they're watching on YouTube, or you can hear if you're listening on the radio, Ernie Manous is out today, and I'm Doug Miller filling in for the multi-talented Mr. Manous. It's good to be here with you today, Celeste.
Doug, it's great to be here. I feel like we should be talking about weather because there's a cool front coming through. But
Frank's not here.
I think you're the wrong guy.
All I can tell you is it's not hot anymore, but get ready. Who knows? This is it's Christmas time in Houston, and it ain't going to snow. That's all I can say.
For sure.
My old friend David Paul tells me it's to be expected to rain in a few days, but we'll see about that. So, but moving on to subjects I know a little more about coming up on Hello Houston, we're going to talk with Houston's newest city council member, Alejandra Salinas. She is an at-large council member, which means she represents everyone in the city of Houston. She'll talk about what she's going to do with this new job she has. Interesting little detail, she cast her first roll call vote yesterday, and it was against Mayor John Whitmire. We'll talk to her about that and why. She will also take your questions at 713-440-8870. But first, the headlines.
Yes, we have been monitoring the situation out of Minneapolis. And today, Minneapolis public schools canceled classes for the remainder of the week due to safety concerns and out of an abundance of caution. Protests broke out overnight after an immigration and customs enforcement agent shot and killed a woman on Wednesday. Federal and local officials are arguing over what exactly happened. President Trump and other members of his administration characterized the ICE agents' actions as an act of self-defense. However, state, local leaders, and eyewitnesses are casting doubt on that account and call for a full and fair investigation.
So joining us now to discuss this shooting incident in Minneapolis from the campus of Rice University, the executive director of the Claudio X. Gonzalez Center for the U.S. and Mexico, for the study of U.S. and Mexico at the Baker Institute of Public Policy, Tony Payan. First of all, Tony, with a title like that, I need to look at your business card someday, but it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Yes, Tony, you were on Hello Houston 6 months ago, and we were discussing specifically the expansion of ICE through the One Big Beautiful Bill. And you outlined and detailed the dangers of the rapid increase of law enforcement at a very quick rate. Here we are today seeing a situation where we're not sure exactly what happened, and we're watching this and we're looking at this very closely. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the academic bibliography has been very clear for a very long time. Political scientists have followed the growth and the expansion of law enforcement agencies in particular, the government in general, but I think law enforcement agencies in particular, when you recruit very fast, very quickly, and do not train agents in the right protocols, the right way to deal with the public, the right ways to de-escalate an issue in the streets, when they don't follow the rules and regulations that many law enforcement agencies have put in place to avoid just this kind of incident. Of course, mistakes are going to be made, and these are fatal mistakes. This woman, Ms. Good, was killed in Minnesota, and we've seen these incidents by ICE. We saw how they unleashed a dog on another immigrant in the Washington, D.C. area. We've seen them shoot at a father who's dropping a kid at school in Chicago. So they're making all kinds of mistakes. Of course, this is part of the spectacle. It's part of the Trump administration's way of enforcing immigration, is a turbocharged deportation-only immigration policy. And they're recruiting very fast, $50,000 bonuses for these guys to sign up with very little vetting on who these people are, what they believe, and what they're doing in the streets. And the president's still defending these guys and what happened in Minneapolis. So this should have been expected, should have been seen, and it's a consequence of what we have established for a very long time in the literature.
But it's interesting, Tony, because I think what makes this very unique is something that you were discussing, 6 months ago, and the concern that you had was around foreign-born citizens, or, looking at this there's concern around racial profiling, immigrant communities. But we know the woman who was fatally shot was named Renee Nicole Good. She was a U.S. citizen. She was 37 years old. She's a mother of 3 and described by her family as a poet, a writer, a wife, a mom. She had just recently moved to Minneapolis. She had previously lived in Colorado and Kansas City. So I guess my question becomes, is she's not necessarily, to me, fitting the profile of somebody that ICE would want to detain or stop or profile.
I think one of the problems that we see is that ICE is employing racial profiling. Mm-hmm. Most of the people that they're stopping, whether it's in New Orleans or whether it's in Houston itself, we've had some raids in Houston, or whether it's in Minneapolis or Los Angeles or New York and on, are really people of color, brown and black people. That's where they focus. But evidently, there's a lot of resistance to the Trump administration and to these very draconian immigration law enforcement. And people are going to protest, and that will include people who are Black Americans, citizens, of course, and this is going to include, of course, a lot of European descendants, Americans, white Americans, I guess, and they're going to be in the way, and they're going to be protesting. And I think if the ICE agents are not ready to de-escalate, this is what is going to happen. It's not the first time. And by the way, we've seen that they have detained people who are U.S. citizens who have tried to prove that they are U.S. citizens to them, and yet nonetheless they cart them off to a detention center, and then days later they release them with an apology, and that includes all kinds of people. So they ought to know that there are going to be people who resist these actions, and they ought to know what to do with them. I think the difference here is with this particular woman in Minneapolis is that exactly what you said. She is a white woman, and she's a mother, and she has absolutely no record. And it appears from the videos that I watched online that she was actually trying to get away. And so there was a violation of the ICE protocol itself, not to shoot on people who are getting away from you. And so there's going to be a lot of backlash. I think this may be an important turning point for ICE that is coming under increasing scrutiny.
But Tony, in this case, we're talking about someone who is driving a vehicle, a driver of a car. It is possible the windows were tinted. There are all sorts of possibilities. We don't know whether this ICE agent could tell what color this woman was. If she was a woman, it's possible this ICE agent saw only a vehicle driving toward him or her. I don't know which it was we're talking about here. So really the question becomes, is it a legitimate defense? And I understand that law enforcement is not your specific field of expertise, but is it a legitimate defense for this officer, for this agent, I beg your pardon, to say, I was in fear of my life, and so I fired my weapon?
There's a couple of things that I think take us away from that hypothesis. The very first is that this woman was across the road, and then there was an ICE truck or an ICE van coming towards her, and she waved them through. So that particular gray vehicle went in front of her and passed her. And then another truck came right up against her. The agent came out of the truck and walked right up to her. There was another agent right there standing by and then of course they came right up to her and they said, get out of the car. And of course you can see the wheels turning. First, she backed off, and then the wheels are turning to the right, which means that woman was trying to move onto the road and away from the agents. The other agent that was in front of the car, not quite in front, but over angled to the left side of the vehicle, as the vehicle was turning right, well, that agent should have known that the protocol was essentially to let the vehicle through. They're not supposed to, as per the protocol that they're trained to do, the ICE agents themselves, they're not supposed to fire on anybody in a vehicle that's turning to move away from them. That was very clear. Evidently, this will have to be discussed in a court of law. The state of Minnesota is likely to move against this agent. The federal government is likely to come in his defense. We don't know where this is going to end up. A lot of this evidence will be viewed by a jury, I think, eventually, hopefully, in Minnesota, and then they will have to decide. But I've watched the videos quite a few times over and over from different angles. And I think the protocol dictated that that particular agent ought to move further to the left, let the car go. They're not supposed to shoot at somebody who's getting away from them, no matter who they are and what they're doing. And I think that is key. That is going to be key evidence in a potential trial in the future.
And this gets back to the point you made earlier about de-escalation, that perhaps an agent with more gray hairs who'd been around for a while would have known to simply step away. Interesting point. Now, if this had happened in the state of Texas, and if the driver had survived, I suspect she would have been charged with a crime such as attempted capital murder of a police officer, something of that nature. But Kristi Noem, the director of Homeland Security, described it as an act of domestic terrorism. How do you define terrorism, and does this fit the definition of that word?
Well, terrorism is a very specific definition. It means that you are trying to use certain means, I guess, violence or car bombs or specific methods of violence to overthrow the system, to impede government work, and so on. This was not the case. I think it's very clear that the woman was moving away. Obviously, the Trump administration has turbocharged the deportation system. I think one of the problems that we're seeing is that this particular administration has no immigration policy other than deportation. That's exclusively their policy, and they're doing it in a way that creates a kind of a public political spectacle, because you can do law enforcement in a way that you do investigations, you identify the individuals, you quickly move in. Look, our armed forces did an excellent job in Caracas at moving into the presidential palace and plucking out that guy. Sure, there were some people who were killed there that were protecting Maduro. They did it almost surgically. I think law enforcement has to be done that way, and they have to be trained to de-escalate. ICE agents are not doing that. They're moving around in communities, and I think they're trying to create a spectacle to intimidate, to push people away. We've seen them over and over gas people and throw tear gas at them and shove them on the floor and handcuff them and do all kinds of things like that. That is not the way law enforcement is supposed to do it. Almost anybody will be able to tell you that. So I think that this is specifically designed to be a very intimidating spectacle. And I think that's what is very, very concerning. And the administration is, of course, going to defend its policy. It's going to defend the agents that are acting that way by design, because I think this is the way they want it to look. Well, that's the consequence. And we'll see. I think we've seen it already, and we'll see many more incidents in the future.
It's interesting, Tony. We have discussed here on Hello Houston the long history and complexity of immigration policy right here in the United States. And we can all agree. I think that if a police officer pulls someone over, we stop. If a law enforcement who is clearly dressed as a police officer, as a Border Patrol agent, it is very obvious that they are the person. Even if you in charge or of the law, even if you walk into an airport, if somebody stops you, you listen. There are a lot of questions around ICE agent protocols and understanding how they're going into, and you've kind of touched on this, into communities with unmarked cars, wearing face masks, being completely covered. Do you think this is going to have a real ripple effect on how U.S. citizens will now approach and listen to perhaps Border Patrol agents or ICE agents? Because, I know myself, I think that if somebody questioned my citizenship, I would be like, excuse me? What right do you, that kind of situation. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history of, and the psychology, I guess, of how that's going to work and that dynamic?
Yes. Look, Celeste, I think you and I, of course, citizens of the United States, get stopped by the police, and we are asked for our documents, usually, our ability to drive a vehicle,
Driver's
and things like driver's
license.
license and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we comply, and then we probably get a ticket for speeding or whatever we're doing, right? But there is a compact, and there has been a compact for a very long time in the United States that citizens stop when they are asked to be stopped, and they show proof of whatever documentation the policeman is asking for. There is a compact, and we're supposed to trust them. We're supposed to to come to the police if we need to. If we witness a crime, we're supposed to report it. If we are victims of a crime, we're supposed to come and report that particular crime. We're supposed to aid the police in doing its job, its law enforcement. Here, I think we're kind of breaking that compact, because everybody's suspect. They don't begin with the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty or illegal, so to speak. You are immediately presumed to be illegal in the country, and then harassed and harassed. And we've seen videos over and over again until you prove to them, and sometimes not even if you prove to them or tell them that you are a U.S. citizen, you're still carted off to a detention center, and you're still harassed. So the trust is broken. I think a lot of these communities are going to be very suspicious. And Program 287G, which essentially deputizes local law enforcement as immigration officers. The federal government offers certain financial incentives to local police forces to aid in that. And if you get stopped, then you know that and you don't have the documentation with you, and you try to tell them that you don't have it, for example, the local law enforcement agent is going to call ICE, and they're going to question you. So that compact is being broken. That is not supposed to be the way we do law enforcement in the United States. This is police that has really exceeded the way and the protocols, and really just due process, human rights, and all kinds of lines have been crossed here. And I think that compact is going to take a very long time to really be restored between us citizens and, of course, the police that we're supposed to trust and go to for protection.
Tony, when you were discussing essentially the expansion of ICE again back in July, you used the term mission creep. Do you think this is an example of that, or is that off base?
No, it is mission creep. I mean, think about the Border Patrol. Obviously, the statute says clearly that the Border Patrol and immigration agents have a jurisdiction within 100 air miles from the U.S. borders. If you go around the border of the United States, that is a long way, almost to San Antonio in the case of Texas. And of course, it covers most of the blue cities and towns on the East Coast. Think about 100 miles that a plane is supposed to fly from the coastline all the way into. So they have a lot of jurisdiction, but the Border Patrol in the past had actually been mostly focused on the border. Most of them, 95%, had been stationed on the U.S.-Mexico border. That was their That was their area of operations. And ICE was supposed to do very specific customs and immigration enforcement by a judge through following certain protocols, certain orders to deport within the U.S. territory. Now the Border Patrol is deployed all around in those cities. Most of them, a lot of them are blue cities, of course. So there is a sense that they're being harassed, that the citizens of those places are being harassed. So I think at the end of the day, if they are expanding. I mean, the border patrol I grew up in the El Paso area, and I can tell you we were accustomed to seeing the Border Patrol all over the place. Now you can see them in New York, you can see them in Washington D.C., you can see them in San Francisco, you can see them all over the place. So they're agencies are by nature imperialistic. They're going to try to acquire more resources, more agents, more prestige, and of course, more jurisdiction. And I think the Border Patrol is really out of it. They should really be focused on the Canadian and the Mexican border, and ICE ought to be doing more pinprick operations to deport individuals that are criminal. The president himself has said that is the objective. This doesn't look that is the objective. 95% of the individuals that they have caught and deported have no criminal record. Yes, they're in the United States without authorization, but they have no criminal record. So the stated policy is not in line with the operations in the streets. And I think that's a very serious problem.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking with Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, Tony Payan. If you would like to join the conversation, you can call 713-440-8870. Let's go to the phone lines. James from Conroe is on the line. James, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question for Tony Payan?
Okay, so I have a quick comment, and then I'll ask the question. I watched the videos. I watched the video in slow motion, etc. In my opinion, this was murder, absolutely cold-blooded murder. Now, if I have ICE agents pulling on my door, pulling out their weapons, telling me to get out of the car, I'm going to do the same thing the lady did. I'm not getting out of the car. I'm going to try to drive away and escape from them because they scare me. And so with that being said, with all the information that's out there, do you see this as murder or do you see this as law enforcement? And I'll hang up and listen.
Tony, what are your thoughts on what James just asked you? Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, the culpability of this particular action is going to have to be determined by a jury. Hopefully, we'll get there. We don't know. But the president said that the agent was injured and that he was attacked with a vehicle, that the vehicle was weaponized. That's not what I see in the videos that I've seen. I've seen them from different angles, different ways of looking at the evidence, the visual or the video evidence. That's not what I see. I think this is an agent. They're very hot-headed. You can see sometimes that the temperature rises and the emotions really just overflow, and the agents get very aggressive, and so do people. I mean, if you're being essentially attacked, or so you're in front of somebody who's very aggressive, emotions can get out of hand. And I think he didn't follow the protocol. It was evident that she was moving away. To me, it was evident that she was trying to get away, and that he just got incensed. And you can see him after the incident, of course, moving his hand like, let's move, let's get out of here, let's move, sort of like that. So he was not in the hospital. The president outright lied. He said that he was in the hospital, he's been attacked. Not at all. Afterwards, you can see him sort of waving his hand in the air and telling the other agents to sort of move on. So, this was a guy who just, things got out of hand. I think his culpability will be determined in a court of law. Perhaps I think Minnesota will pursue charges against him. But I think it doesn't look good for him.
So Tony Payan with the Baker Institute at Rice University, there was a time when incidents like this would happen right here in Houston, incidents of police brutality, whatever you want to call them, bad shootings, questionable shootings. But it all came down to a he said, she said between witnesses. And police officers here in the Houston area were routinely no-billed for any sort of police shooting. But all of that has changed, it seems, with the ubiquity of cameras. There are so many cameras out there that captured this. If it had not been for the camera being there, we probably would have heard a few things about this, but we wouldn't be talking about the video. We'd have a he said, she said. Has the ubiquity of cameras changed that relationship between law enforcement and the communities there to serve and protect?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, think about all the various abuses by the police, because this is not new. It has always happened. And you can imagine the 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s when this was happening in the streets and people being shot by the police and on and on. And these things essentially, people believed the law enforcement agents, and that was the end of it. But since the 1990s, when cameras began to show up, and then later telephones began to show up with cameras, and now there's all kinds of evidence. It allows citizens and public opinion, you and me, to be able to look at different videos that circulate in the internet from different angles. There's a lot of people, you can see a lot of people around with their phones up in the air taking video, and clearly you can make your own judgment. And now all that is evidence that can play against law enforcement. Of course, the police forces try to protect themselves. Certainly after the 1990s, you remember Mr. Rodney King in Los Angeles. You remember George Floyd up in Minnesota, and there was a lot of video evidence going around, and that was essentially in the court of public opinion. Now it's even more so. Law enforcement agencies have tried to protect themselves by establishing protocols, distance, by establishing, and even there was a big debate at some point that I remember about the agents themselves having their own cameras on their chests so that they could capture the moment and the interaction. That's still the case. Now cameras are also mounted on the patrol cars. They're everywhere. And I think that sort of behooves the law enforcement agents, certainly ICE, to be a lot more cautious and, of course, try to figure out how to de-escalate a situation like that.
Right.
I mean, that was clearly a very big issue there.
You know, it is interesting. A few years ago when Houston City Council was debating whether they should fund body cams for Houston police officers, I telephoned over to a police supply store, told me, come on over, take a look. Cops are here buying these things. A lot of police officers want body cams. Tony, we have a call on the line. Jay from Pearland. Jay, you're on the radio. What's on your mind?
Yes, good morning, guys. I work for Homeland Security, so as an officer, I'll tell you guys, I'm going to give you guys two perspectives. One thing is, yes, a vehicle can be used as a weapon. Number two, a lot of times we have to utilize common sense. I mean, be honest with you, I worked the Mexican border many times. You know how many times idiots has tried to run me over with a vehicle? And a lot of times you have to think about the situation you're in, and you're like, you know what? I'm working around a lot of fools, a lot of idiots. It's going to be a dangerous situation. You just have to kind of like move away.
So what was your impression? You're in law enforcement. When you saw this video, what did you think? You still there, Jay?
Yeah, I'm here. That whole situation, and I can actually go out there and work for those guys. But anyway, it's just it's a crappy situation to be in. It's a crappy situation to be in. They got protesters out there. You know, people are going to be ramming you with cars. I mean,
it's a tough position to be in. But as you look at that video,
you want to go home at the end of the day to your family, correct?
Yes. Right,
you want
right.
somebody to run you over, kill you guys, or anything like that. You as a person, you have to think of yourself. Am I going to just try to hustle my ass, to the side and let this lady go about her business, or am I going to shoot? I mean, it's your call. It's your training. It's your experiences. It's everything comes into play.
So, Jay, let me ask you a hard question. What do you think you would have done in that situation?
I've been in that situation, I would have scooted my ass to the side as quick as I can.
All right.
Thank you, Jay from Pearland. And thank you, Tony Payan, who is the executive director of the Claudio X. Gonzalez Center for the U.S. and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Thank you, Tony, for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, guys. Until next time.
And coming up, a look at improving plastic recycling. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues. We'll be back after the break.
Hi, I'm Lenny Ambrose from St. Arnold Brewing Company, proud supporters of Houston Public Media. Right now, with your $60 donation, you can choose tickets to News and Brews. This member-exclusive event takes place February 17th. Enjoy a pint, connect with fellow NPR fans, and meet the Houston Public Media Newsroom in person. Select News and Brews tickets when you donate at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from arbitrator, mediator, and attorney Sylvia Mayer, providing in-person and video conference arbitration and mediation services. More information available at smayerlaw.com.
Support comes from Discovery Green Conservancy, presenting Houston's outdoor ice skating rink, offering a wintertime experience for all, surrounded by public art and downtown views. Open through February 16th. More at discoverygreen.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Celeste Díaz Schurman and guest host Doug Miller.
The University of Houston's Energy Transition Institute recently released a paper suggesting ways that Americans could do more recycling and what is wrong with our country's current recycling system. Their suggestion, introduce a united national plan to help tackle plastic waste and ultimately create a circular plastics economy. Now, to tell us more about this and the challenges preventing this change from happening, we're joined now by Dr. Debalina Sengupta, the Assistant VP and COO of the University of Houston's Energy Transition Institute. Dr. Sengupta, welcome to Hello Houston. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
So tell us basically what you discovered as you studied the recycling infrastructure of our nation.
So recycling itself is a additional thing that we do after we create our waste. So we typically would send our waste to landfills, but recycling is taking a part of that waste, like plastics, and doing something with it so that it can be used over and over again before we finally discard it. So that's where our recycling infrastructure really comes into play.
So let me ask you a question that whose answer may be obvious, but I'll pose it anyway. Why is it necessary for us to recycle?
It's just the sheer volume of waste and the type of waste. One of the things with plastics, which is the most recycled or intended recycling, we also have metals, we have paper, and all the fractions of waste. But I'll talk about a little bit on plastics. It's very important for us to recycle that waste or do something with it, because ultimately, if we do not do anything with it, it is going to end up into our waterways, into our food systems, and into the atmosphere, which we don't want to happen. So it is very important for us to think about the end of life of plastics, because it doesn't go away by itself. It will stay forever.
And it's interesting, Debalina, because when you're talking about recycling rates, can you educate us on how does Texas fare compared to other states when we look at our recycling and what we need to be doing to evening out the recycling game?
Yeah. So I'll come to Texas, but even in the national level, we have great recycling rates for metals and paper, but we do very poorly about our plastics, because plastics, of all the plastics that are generated, only about 10%, 8 to 10%, and in some places it may be even as low as 5% that gets actually recycled, recovered, and recycled. So we have this whole gamut of 90% of plastics that's still out there that's in the environment that is not getting recycled.
So is that because people simply aren't throwing their plastics into the recycling bin, or is it a function of the market, that there's just no market or a much smaller market for recycled plastics than paper or aluminum cans?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because these are definitely market-driven. There needs to be a market for the recycled products, but it's also driven by the infrastructure. So some small communities may not have a recycling infrastructure in place at all. So even if people want to recycle, they don't have the resources. They don't have a bin that they would put their plastics in. And I'll give you an example of very small town, Port Lavaca in Texas. they didn't have a recycling infrastructure until one of the companies decided that they want that community to have that infrastructure in place. So they worked with a waste management company and they prepared the town and city for those sort of things. And it's maybe a town of, 16,000 people. So we may not have that. However, in other places like Houston or the greater Houston area, I live in the Woodlands, so they have a recycling infrastructure in place. But that's when the complex questions comes in, because sometimes we don't know what we should be putting in our recycling bins, because what if we put in the recycling bins ultimately gets transported to the recycling centers and ultimately gets converted into the different fractions. Now, with that also, there is another point where we need to have the different technologies in place to convert that plastics that are collected, and we put it into those technologies, which is not fully developed in some places, or it may take you to transport that to a longer distance to have that converted. So I would say it's a very complex system, and we do not have all the pieces in place yet to make sure that we have all the necessary processes in place.
So Houston city government had an interesting experience with recycling a couple of decades ago when they got serious about recycling down at City Hall. They set up a system thinking it will pay for itself because we will sell the commodity, the recycled products, and pay for the recycling system with that. Pretty soon a lot of other cities got into the same game, and the market for the commodity collapsed. How do you create a market for recycled plastic if there is more and more recycled plastic coming into the marketplace?
Yeah, that's where the volume of the plastics, I talked about the amount that's left untreated or unconverted, comes into place. Right now, our recycling infrastructure, what we found out from our study that we talked about, there are two different kinds, broad classifications of recycling. One is mechanical recycling, where you are taking in the plastics and converting it into the same sort of plastics. Now, that requires you to have very nice plastics, and the grade of plastic needs to be the similar type. What ultimately happens is that when you're converting the plastic to a different compound, it just degrades the quality of the plastic. So you do not really have a market where you are choosing your virgin plastics, which is coming from your petrochemical companies, instead of going to the recycled product, because there are many things. For example, medical grade plastics, you need to have very pristine conditions and the quality of the plastic. Then the food films that touches your food, they need to have a certain property. So that is why you can have the degradation. So even if you have a promise of the recycled market, it may not work. That's when we started looking at what the technologies are. So if you are able to convert your plastics to another product, which is still needed in the market, for example, oils. So you can convert your plastics into oils, and then you can refine it in your existing refinery infrastructure. It would go into your fuel market. But then you are creating a new market for these recycled materials. You are thinking of alternate products instead of plastic to plastics.
Will it be, let me put it this way, there was some journalism a couple of years ago conducted by ProPublica that indicated that, well, the oil and gas industry had essentially come up with the idea of recycling plastics as kind of a PR gimmick to try to help themselves out of a jam in public relations. And it was suggested at the time that there really can't be a marketplace for recycled plastic that will be economically viable because it will always be cheaper to create new plastics. I'm wondering if you agree with that.
So I'm not speaking about any company here. I'll talk about it from purely a research perspective. So everything starts with research, and you need to put in money and effort into research to make sure that you're getting to the product. What we see in our oil companies or businesses today is a work product of more than 100 years of work that has been put in. Before, we used to just extract kerosene from crude oil and throw away the rest of it. So similarly with this area, we have processes to put that plastic into place, but there are also the collection, separation, sorting, and getting to that point which is required, and optimizing the whole process with the cost in mind. that needs to be taken care of. So it's not just like, and the technology itself is also not a single technology. There is a host of technologies that can be used depending what your infrastructure is. Now, what we have is our existing infrastructure of the oil refining. So that is like large scale, and you can actually put in some of those converted plastics oils into that process to further refine it. So it's not a final product that you're producing from this recycling process, which is pyrolysis or gasification. Now, there are smaller markets, smaller infrastructure required for mechanical recycling, where you're taking out the purer streams of plastic that you can extract and converting it to the purer streams. So it's just a matter of how you're managing the feedstock, how you're managing your sorting and separation and collection processes, and then putting it into a system that is appropriate for that sort of plastic. So you do not have a one-size-fits-all conversion process for the plastics that we collect.
Dr. Debalina Sengupta, from the University of Houston's Energy Transition Institute, your paper that you've co-authored recently suggested that we have a lot of localized recycling efforts, but we need a national recycling effort. Could you explain why?
That is primarily because your plastic is generated for a nation, even global markets. So the quality of the plastics that you're making is for the global markets. Now, if you have a localized system that would say that you are only going to accept certain kinds of plastics and leave it out, I'm just giving an example, leave the rest out, then you are just asking the producers or the users of those plastics to cater to those needs and have those diverted. So you may be leaving out a lot of the plastic streams that are not able to be converted. And even there, like a state-to-state difference would mean that the companies who are producing it or using the plastic in their products have to be very varied in the different types of technologies that they use, and they cannot have that much of, I would say, variation in the types of plastics that they are creating or the products that they are creating. So that's why a nationwide policy would really help to guide the policies for the different states. And even at the local levels, it's not even controlled by the state. It's the municipalities, it's the companies that are doing the waste management that are having that. So a federal guidance would really help. We had started to try it in 1992, but it did fail for several reasons, but it doesn't mean that we cannot try it again.
And that's what I was going to ask you, Debalina. Why do you think it's been so challenging to get these just uniform policies moving forward and get together on this regarding the research that we know from?
It's a scope scale issue as well, because what works for a very small community of 10,000 people will probably not work for a city of 16 million people or 5 million people like Houston and Greater Houston. So that's where the scope and scale really comes into play, and the investment in the infrastructure. So I think what we are all great in wanting to have the recycling done right, but are we willing to pay? Who is paying for that recycling infrastructure? Because ultimately it's the consumer who is going to pay or get a subsidy or get a credit on their waste stream. So I've seen many models that are like incentivizing the recycling, so people don't get to pay for recycling, but they get to pay for their waste. So they weigh the waste bags and they pay for the waste bags instead of, so you are incentivized to do more recycling. So it is going to be taking an effort from the community, the people who are ultimately going to pay, the producers who are generating these plastics, and the government to have the policies and infrastructure in place, which would ultimately make this a very good effort altogether.
Right. You're listening to Dr. Debalina You're listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking with Dr. Debalina Sengupta, the Assistant VP and CEO of the University of Houston's Energy Transition Institute, about how we can improve recycling in the United States. And we did receive a text from Julie in Galveston. And she says, as a delivery driver, it has made me aware of how much plastic waste is being generated from plastic water bottles. It would be nice if people used filters or filtered containers for their water. You know, Debalina, what are your thoughts on that? We have seen the implementation of paper straws, or pulling back on the plastic bags in different communities. What do you think needs to happen there?
Of course, like the general public awareness has increased on this over the last decade, I would say. And when I used to work for the EPA, I worked on their sustainable materials management team, which makes considers the materials that we use in our daily goods for the greater good. So we are thinking about it as a material and not waste.
Interesting.
So that's one thing. Coming to the personal recycling rates and personal incentives, we have seen a host of like going out from your plastic water bottles to your refillable water cups. We have seen water fountains come up with that sort of things. But even after all of this, one of the major challenges that still remains is our packaging. So some of our packaging materials, like single-use plastics, the grocery bags that you put in your onions and potatoes, and then come home and just discard it. So it's with you in use for maybe half an hour to an hour. So those are the major problem creators in your system, because these thin film plastics, they will mess up with your cleaning and sorting system in a recycling facility. So they are going to go and jam your machinery. And so if you are not able to take care of those sort of plastics, and the packaging materials, which we focus our research on, that's about 40% of your plastic waste.
Wow.
Water bottles are fine. They can be collected. They are good ways of collecting that. But it's not enough. So there is this 40% of the packaging materials that create the biggest problem in your system.
All of this seems like it would be non-controversial from a political standpoint. But I recall you mentioned plastic bags. A few years ago, Galveston tried to ban plastic shopping bags. There was discussion of that. And some sort of plastic bag lobby got to the Attorney General of the state of Texas, who intervened to stop these bans on plastic bags. And I was rather surprised by that, because I thought recycling, environmental issues, rather non-controversial. But is there political resistance to a lot of what you're talking about, to recycling itself, which seems like a non-controversial idea?
It's there is political controversies, and I'm a scientist or an engineer, so I keep away from those. I try to give the science and technology as much as possible. But what I would say is that, of course, there are interests from groups, and of course, environmental groups have concerns, which are legitimate concerns to some extent. But that is where we can learn from certain countries like Europe and Canada. They have, and that's one part of our study. We also have a website that supports the two, the data that we have collected from these two countries or regions. Then yes, there may be bans in place in some places which work, but then you'll also see the consumer. The consumer also wants those plastic bags in some cases instead of paper bags, because they'll tear, and while you're bringing grocery in, it will fall down on the ground. So people have that. But in certain areas, it may make sense to have those bans in place, especially in our beaches or our waterways. Near our waterways, we can have those sort of bans in place. But bans never work, because you are preventing something from coming in. What would work is incentivizing the people to do things right. What are the incentives in place?
Dr. Debalina Sengupta is the Assistant VP and CEO of the University of Houston's Energy Transition Institute. Dr. Sengupta, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you very much.
And coming up, we are going to share our current obsessions, and we'll be back right after the break. Stay with us.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Listen here for hour number 3 of the 2025 Musicians Memorial Series, when we remember music greats like Joe Ely, Connie Francis, Cleo Lane, Marianne Faithfull, and John Edwards of the Spinners.
I'll keep working my way back to you, babe.
We put more music greats from the year 2025 in the spotlight on the 2025 Musicians Memorial Special, hour number 3, right here, real soon. Saturday evening at 7 on News 88.7.
Every week on The Pulse, we hear stories at the heart of health, science, and innovation. Sometimes physicians make confessions.
We were dead wrong.
Nurses tell us what they dream about.
Beep, beep. Yes, you dream about it.
We explore how science is done.
When we're looking for the needle in the haystack, we want to look in the right haystack.
And we have frank discussions about ideas.
It's a joke.
The Pulse, Sundays at 2 p.m. on News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from the Clarion at Brazosport College, presenting the Westerly's Brass Quartet, performing in concert on Friday, January 16th. More information at brazosport.edu/Clarion. Support comes from the Houston Automotive Show at NRG Center, highlighting the latest vehicles, off-roading adventures, and automotive technology displays within the combined auto and boat event. More information on schedules, exhibitors, and venue details at automotiveshow.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Celeste Díaz Schurman and guest host Doug Miller.
Every Thursday, we get to share our current obsessions, that thing that is just taking over our lives and our thoughts. Doug, you're sitting here with me, so we get to hear yours.
You know, I almost hate to say it, but I've got a pet peeve that I need to share.
This is Hello Houston, not Houston Matters.
I know, I understand, but this is strange because I have an obsession with all of the bandit signs all over the city. I know, that's strange. That's very strange. But I was driving around last weekend, and there was some sort of a tax auction going on.
Okay.
And everywhere I looked, this company, whoever they were, this auction house, whatever, had slapped up these ugly-looking signs promoting their whatever their sale was. And they do it every year. They come around and they put these things all over the neighborhood. I would go around and I even collect them sometimes because I hate the darn things. That's mine.
That's a real obsession right there.
That's very odd. That's very odd. Call the cops.
That's interesting. So have you ever thought about reaching out to them directly and telling them, hey, you need to come back and pick these up?
You know what? I've tried that. I tried that once, and I get scoffed at. And then I called the sign regulators over at 311, and they take care of the problem. It is against the law in the city of Houston, city ordinance, to post illegal bandit signs. And the city takes care of the problem.
That is very interesting. I feel like right now my current obsession is looking at my Garmin and figuring out my sleep and figuring out how much, deep sleep I got versus just sleep in general. My, I think it's REM or your REM sleep, because I'm always shocked at how little sleep I get these days.
So are you doing well or not? What's the story?
Not doing that great.
Oh, no.
Not doing that great. But we want to hear your current obsessions coming up in the second hour of Hello Houston. Be sure to send us those our way at 713-440-8870. We will be back with the top of the stories, the headlines, what's happening coming up in the second hour of Hello Houston. Stay with us after this break.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from the German Saturday School of Houston, offering German language classes for children and adults, beginning Saturday, January 10th at Bel Air United Methodist Church. Teachers may apply. More at 713-569-0801.
76 degrees and overcast at the University of Houston. I'm Tiffany Taylor. 20% chance of showers through the day. Highs in the upper 70s. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced new U.S. dietary guidelines. We'll discuss with Memorial Hermann sports dietitian. I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman.
And I am Doug Miller, guest hosting today. We will also hear another edition of Frank Billingsley's Friends of Frank, in which he talks with podcaster, content creator, and longtime Houston news anchor Dominique Sachse.
Plus, we'll also share a rundown of the things we're currently obsessed with this week for our regular Thursday feature, Current Obsessions.
And, of course, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org and clicking on the purple box.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. In Minnesota, protests continue in Minneapolis for another day after 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed by an ICE agent while in her car yesterday. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem today again defended the ICE agent, saying he was just doing his job. Yesterday, she said Good drove at the agent, which local and state officials dispute. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has issued an order to prepare the state's National Guard for deployment. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf has more.
Governor Walz, a Democrat, issued a warning order for Minnesota's National Guard, putting them on standby for a possible deployment. At a press conference in Minneapolis following the shooting, Walz stressed that the troops remain under state control.
I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops.
In recent months, President Trump has federalized several other states' National Guard troops, often against the wishes of Democratic governors, and deployed them to protect federal immigration officials and property. Walz spoke to Trump directly in the press conference, saying Minnesota does not need any more involvement from the federal government. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Washington.
The Senate today voted to advance a resolution requiring the Trump administration to secure congressional approval before taking further military action in Venezuela. The measure needed just a simple majority and cleared the chamber by a vote of 52-47, with 5 Republicans joining Democrats to advance the measure. It's a procedural step to start debate on a final passage, though a final vote hasn't yet been scheduled. On social media, Trump slammed Republicans who voted for it, calling it a war powers act unconstitutional. Now, the bill would face a steep climb in the GOP-controlled House and a likely veto from President Trump. Meanwhile, American military forces are now escorting an oil tanker to the U.S. after a 2-week chase. This is part of a U.S. crackdown on ghost ships transporting oil from Venezuela. NPR's Quick Myrie reports.
The U.S. forces prepared to seize the Bella 1 oil tanker in the Caribbean in late December as it was heading to Venezuela to pick up oil. But the tanker refused to halt. Instead, it changed course and headed out to the Atlantic with U.S. forces in pursuit. Somewhere along the way, the tanker changed its name from the Bella 1 to the Marinera and also changed its flag from that of Guyana to Russia. U.S. troops boarded the ship Wednesday in the North Atlantic between Britain and Iceland. Now in American custody, the ship and the crew are headed to the U.S. The U.S. has seized 4 oil tankers linked to Venezuela since this campaign began last month. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
And you're listening to NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. Harris County residents had an opportunity to voice their opinions about a controversial plan to use eminent domain to take about 9 acres of Hermann Park land for the expansion of Ben Taub Hospital. About 30 people lined up to ask questions, many in opposition to the plan. Some raised questions about how the hospital expansion will continue building on an existing floodplain. Tomara Bell, a local super neighborhood president, was one of those opposing voices.
because this will never come back. We will flood. The medical center will not flood because they have walls all around it that they put in back in 2003 after Allison. So it's a fact of telling the public, you don't give a damn.
A final vote on the plan will take place in March. Following several months of delay, Harris County commissioners have appointed an interim county attorney. Deputy County Attorney Jonathan Frombon was selected on Thursday to serve as the county's interim chief legal advisor.
I see the county attorney's job as being a practical partner to this court, helping you understand the legal landscape, finding solutions to legal problems, raising issues when we need to, and staying out of the way when we don't.
His appointment comes after former county attorney Christian Menifee announced his run for Houston's 18th congressional district seat. Governor Greg Abbott will be in Houston today, standing alongside the Houston Police Officers Union, which recently endorsed Abbott for re-election. In a statement, Union President Doug Griffith said that Abbott has, quote, consistently demonstrated his commitment to the men and women who serve on the front lines of public safety. Abbott will be with union representatives this afternoon around 1 o'clock, along with leadership from other law enforcement agencies around the state. Federal researchers are asking for help in the search for their SOFAR spotter buoy named Bob. Researchers say Bob is floating away from East Flower Garden Bank, which is located in the Gulf, just 119 miles from the Texas-Louisiana border. The Flower Garden Bank's National Marine Sanctuary uses the buoy to monitor wave height, wind speed data, and temperatures. It's 76 degrees right now on the University of Houston campus, mostly cloudy today with highs near 80. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Wallace Foundation, an independent, nonpartisan research foundation collaborating with grantees and partners in the arts, school leadership, and youth development. More at wallacefoundation.org. This is NPR.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston with Ernie Manous, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back to the second hour of Hello Houston. Whether you're joining us via YouTube, online, or you're listening to us on 88.7, we appreciate you for chiming in and engaging. And again, that phone number to call or text is 713-440-8870. And don't forget, you can also send us a couple of emails. We've received quite a few about within our first hour, and that is at talk@hellohouston.org. We love hearing from our community and what you have to say. But coming up today on Hello Houston, we're going to have another edition of Frank Billingsley, Friends of Frank, and he's going to be talking with YouTuber, podcaster, author, content creator, and former news anchor of nearly 30 years right here in Houston, Dominique Sachse, and that's going to be a fascinating conversation that we're all very much looking forward to. But first, if you noticed, Ernie and Frank are out today, but joining me is Doug Miller, and he's going to start us off with the headlines.
Good to be here today with you, Celeste. Well, in case you haven't heard, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy has announced new dietary guidelines for Americans focused on promoting whole foods, healthy proteins, and fats. And after decades of hearing warnings about the dangers of eating red meat and foods high in fats, the administration's unveiled a new food pyramid with red meat, cheese, vegetables, and fruits right at the top. Kennedy described the guidelines as the most significant reset on nutrition policy in history, calling for an end to policies that promote highly refined foods that, well, aren't good for us. Kennedy and the Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, called for a dramatic reduction in the consumption of highly processed foods laden with refined carbohydrates, added sugars, excess sodium, fats, and chemical additives. Kennedy saying, and we quote here, "We are ending the war on saturated fats," end quote. Well, joining us now to give us his thoughts on the new food pyramid is the sports dietitian with the Memorial Hermann Rocket Sports Medicine Institute, Brett Singer. And by the way, if you have some thoughts on the new food pyramid, give us a call at 713-440-8870. Josh, sure appreciate you joining us. Or Brett, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Singer, I feel like this is something we've been hearing for a while now, that the old food pyramid was really outdated, that nutrition had changed so much. Do you think this is the right direction and the right move for Americans to get healthy again?
Well, I would say the food pyramid's outdated, but it was removed and replaced about 20 years ago. So I guess to start off with, there's a little bit of confusion because the food pyramid hasn't existed for quite some time. I think it's been 2 decades now since it was removed. Um, in the last 2 decades, we've transitioned to what's been called My Plate, which in reality is quite similar to the way this food pyramid is set up. So the promotion of quite a bit of fruits and vegetables, and then a little bit of lean protein as well as some grains. So I think there are some strong similarities to what has been suggested in the past, and I think there's some nuances to the way they've laid this out as well that are a little bit different.
Walk us through some of those nuances and how they've laid it out.
Yeah, certainly. So going away from the plate, which is maybe a little bit designed a little bit differently versus in this case here, they've got this upside down pyramid or triangle, however you want to describe it. Um, in this case, they've got red meats at the top, and they do have other forms of protein and meats at the top as well. And along in line with vegetables, and then slightly below that is fruits and nuts and seeds, and then whole grains at the very bottom. Some of the other nuances, as you reference, ending the war on saturated fat, but also within the guidelines and the write-up, they still suggest minimizing saturated fat to less than 10% of our total calorie intake. So I think there's going to need to be some further clarification on that, because while they're suggesting we should be consuming more red meats and items that may contain more saturated fat, they've also suggested we should limit saturated fat intake to no more than 10% of our caloric intake.
So I got to tell you something, Brett. Last night I had a really good steak for dinner, and so I've stuck to the guidelines. Should I do that or not? I'm really curious about this because I've been hearing for decades, cut down on red meat, don't eat so much red meat, and now I'm being told I should.
Yeah, so I would suggest I think we should be incorporating some form of protein in our meals on a consistent basis. I think that's in line with the guidelines. And certainly while they incorporate red meats in there, they also had poultry and fish and other items at the top of that pyramid. So I do think it would make sense from a health standpoint to incorporate some form of high protein option into each of your main meals for the day, whether that's in the form of poultry or fish, or on occasion beef or other items such as that. And in addition to, as you'll note, that at the top there's plenty of fruits and vegetables, so that should still be a large component of your meal. I will say that's been part of the guidelines for decades and should still remain as part of the guidelines now. So incorporating some form of lean protein as well as fruits and vegetables into the meal, letting fruits and vegetables be probably the bulk of the meal, would be a focal point for most adults if we can.
As a registered dietitian, do you think these new dietary guidelines, kind of, what Doug was saying, are going to really make people make different decisions on how they eat every day?
That's a tricky one, because at this point in time, we've got pretty good data that shows that Americans don't follow the dietary guidelines, right? And if Americans did follow the existing dietary guidelines, we would probably see significant changes in health throughout the country. And in fact, there has been some different studies looking at whether it's processed versus unprocessed. If we're hitting the dietary guidelines, oftentimes we are seeing significant improvements in terms of health parameters. I think the challenge is, how do you take something as simple as this image and actually get people to adhere to it? Whether it's the former dietary guidelines or the new updated ones, if we can get Americans to follow them on a consistent basis, so incorporating plenty of fruits and vegetables and lean proteins on a daily basis into their routine, I think you'll see some positive responses in terms of health. The question is, how do you do that? And how do you ensure that those types of options are accessible to people, that they understand how to adhere to those things, and how do you actually get people to commit to it consistently? That's a challenge. I think most Americans know that we should be exercising and doing things along those lines, and yet not everyone is doing that as consistently as perhaps we should be.
So when you heard that they were going to reintroduce the food pyramid, you're a dietitian. What did you think? Did you think good idea, bad idea, or what the heck are they up to?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to take it as, learn from it as best as I can and understand what they're trying to implement. Again, I don't feel like the old guidelines had anything wrong with them. And that's where I will point out while there's been some comments that they're distinctly different or there's big changes, there's a lot of similarities between these guidelines and the old ones. I do think if we can find ways to have people adhere to it, that's the biggest challenge. If I were to ask you to come up with what's a really healthy meal, I think both of you would probably tell me fruits and vegetables and protein and a little bit of whole grains, as minimally processed as possible, whole food options as much as we can. I think both of y'all would probably come up with the same idea. The main challenge is how do we get people to adhere to that and understand it.
Right, exactly. I can say I should have a salad for lunch, but instead I go eat some French fries. That's the problem. We all know what's good for us, but here we have the government telling us what we think is good for us. It's interesting that that most of us don't adhere to the guidelines we know in our hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the challenge. And, it's up to the government on their side. So they've laid this out. And now what are the strategies they're going to utilize to hopefully help make it easier for people to adhere to them?
But it's interesting because just listening to Doug talk about, that he should have a salad for lunch, I think that there are new generations coming up realizing everything is being pushed that's protein, protein, protein out with the salad, and make sure that you're having grilled chicken or, a big piece of, some boiled eggs. Talk to us a little bit about the shift just in general of the push of protein.
Yeah. So
no offense, Doug.
The RDA for protein for quite some time has been 0.8 grams per kilogram. Right. And for that's basically how do we consume enough protein to live and to live healthfully. I think the question in the debate comes up, what's healthy versus maybe what's optimal. And so they're making the push that higher protein would probably be more optimal. There is some suggestions that perhaps, particularly in older adults who are at higher risk of losing muscle mass as we age, that higher protein intakes above the RDA might be recommended or required. There are cases where during periods of weight loss that there's a greater risk for muscle loss with lower protein intakes, and so hence the higher protein recommendations. What I will say is when we look at data as far as American intake of protein, most Americans are far exceeding the RDA, and they are already hitting these higher protein guidelines. I find that falling short on protein. And as you alluded to, not only are you seeing promotion of protein-based foods, but now if you go through the grocery store aisles, you'll find, protein-packed options of just about everything from, I don't know, cereals to popcorns to
donuts,
candies and cookies and everything else, right? So everything's kind of incorporating some form of protein into them. So I don't know that protein's necessarily the problem. I think people are having protein thrown at them quite a bit. But certainly encouraging people to have whole food sources of protein in each of their meals is something that is useful, and we should continue to do to help maintain muscle and strength, to help with satiety, and to help with some of the nutrients and micronutrients that come from those protein-based sources.
And I think we should note that this is a protein-powered public radio station. These new guidelines include changes to recommendations on consumption of alcoholic beverages. They're removing specific daily limits. It used to be the limit was 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men. that was the limit. But instead, now the guidelines simply say that, consume less alcohol for better health, and it doesn't really specify any amounts. What are your thoughts on that? What do you hear from friends of yours when they say, "How much can I drink?"
Yeah, so that is an interesting an interesting dynamic, and I guess the responses to questions related to that from those who laid out these guidelines have been interesting to read through. I would say that you still want to try to limit alcohol as much as we possibly can. I think the old guidelines were probably appropriate. I think to try to minimize intake of it is most likely going to be best. There's not really a whole lot of health benefits that come with use of alcohol. There are risks of whether it's cancer-related risk or other disease or illness related to alcohol intake. And so we want to try to minimize the intake of that as much as possible. I certainly respect that people should have the ability to consume alcohol in moderate portions, when they feel like they would like to have something as far as family functions or friends or things like that. Social gatherings certainly make sense. But I think it would be wise to try to minimize intake as much as possible. And I understand their desire to maybe not put a set cap on that. But I do think there is some form of limitation that needs to be set. And it might be helpful to have some level of a little bit more prescriptive recommendations in terms of what limits should be for people.
We've gotten quite a few YouTube comments, and one person said, "I've noticed that dairy is having a bit of a comeback. I guess people have started getting tired of the alternatives." Have you noticed anything about dairy, people being less lactose intolerant, I guess you could say?
No, I don't think less lactose intolerant. I still see plenty of athletes and clients that struggle with lactose intolerance. I think it goes back to there has been a big push toward protein for maybe the last half decade or more, and so incorporating more dairy in there. Having said that, if you look at the dietary guidelines for now versus the old dietary guidelines, they're identical for dairy. Both of them are suggesting we should have 3 servings of dairy. So while they maybe put the image in a certain way, the actual recommendations within the guidelines are identical to the past. So not much has changed in terms of that. I do think they made some comments in terms of full fat dairy. Maybe not, I don't want to put words in their mouth of promoting it, but maybe putting a little bit more, or less guardrails towards less focus on low-fat dairy and being okay with full-fat dairy. So there might be some differences or nuances there that have changed a bit. But certainly I think dairy is a good protein source. It is certainly rich in calcium and does have vitamin D incorporated into it oftentimes, and has a number of other nutrients that can be really helpful for us. And so certainly if we could incorporate some form of dairy in there, that would be useful. And then for those that do have lactose intolerance, there are at this point, whether lactose-free versions of milk that can work, or there are those plant-based options out there and available. As you point out that they are pushing higher protein, oftentimes the cow's milk is going to be higher protein than most of the plant-based options. There are some plant-based options that do contain a heavy amount of protein, but the ones that you'll most commonly think of, like almond milk, is quite low in protein. So there may be some rationale for why they're making that suggestion there.
Brett Singer with the Memorial Hermann Rocket Sports Medicine Institute. We'd like to give the people listening to this program some news they can use. You probably have people, friends of yours, asking you all the time, what should I eat? And what do you discover about what they really do eat that they shouldn't be eating?
Yeah, so I would oftentimes push, if we're trying to be really, really simple, right, in the terms of this, I would suggest that we should probably be eating at least 3 times a day, that within those meals, we should have a source of protein in each of the meals, whether that's from an animal-based source or a plant-based source. We should incorporate some form of fruits or vegetables, and for the average adult, that should probably make up about half of your meal. And that and incorporate whole grain sources, and we should include whole grain sources into our daily routine. So when we put it simply, we should typically have a carb, so a whole grain, a color, so in the form of fruits and vegetables, and a protein source. So we should try to incorporate each of those items into our 3 main meals a day. And if we can be consistent with that, then oftentimes we're going to be on the right track overall. And to their point, I think we should try to do as much minimally processed options as possible. So we want to try and choose fresh fruits and vegetables. We want to choose whole protein sources. And we want to try to choose whole grain options as much as we can.
Brett Singer is a sports dietitian with the Memorial Hermann Rocket Sports Medicine Institute. Brett, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on this.
Bon appetit.
And we do want to give you a quick update. City Council member Alejandra Salinas did get caught in a meeting and will not make today's programming, but we will be sure to reschedule her interview. Coming up on Hello Houston, longtime popular news anchor Dominique Sachse sat down with Frank for another edition of Frank Billingsley's Friends of Frank to chat about what she is up to these days and her time in Houston. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Michael Schaefer. My partner Ellen and I have been proud supporters of public radio and TV for decades.
We really would be lost without our daily fix of unbiased national and local news, cultural programming, and great entertainment.
But with recent federal defunding, stations like Houston Public Media face real challenges.
Now's the time to step up.
Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Thank you.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, the American invasion of Venezuela. I'll talk with the author of How to Hide an Empire, about the seizure of Nicolas Maduro, American imperialism, oil, and Donald Trump's view of power. Historian Daniel Imhovar joins me next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour.
Support comes from Rice University's Master of Interdisciplinary Studies, a program for working adults designed to strengthen communication and critical thinking skills within a community of diverse learners. Details at gls.rice.edu.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, a night of mystery and intrigue with Father Brown at 7, followed by the Sister Boniface Mysteries at 8, and Death in Paradise at 9. Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from arbitrator, mediator, and attorney Sylvia Mayer, providing in-person and video conference arbitration and mediation services. More information available at smayerlaw.com. Support comes from Rothko Chapel, presenting the 31st MLK Birthday Observance. We Got Us, Health and Care Beyond Capitalism, on January 15th at 6:30 p.m. More information at rothkochapel.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Celeste Díaz Schurman and guest host Doug Miller.
Frank Billingsley is taking a break, but we still have a fresh installment of Friends of Frank. He spoke with YouTuber, podcaster, author, content creator, and former news anchor of nearly 30 years right here in Houston, Dominique Sachse. Let's take a listen.
So I'm so excited, Dominique, that you've decided to join me here on Friends of Frank. Thank you. And isn't it ironic that I'm coming to you from your alma mater, the University of Houston?
It's kind of surreal. And I'm coming to you from my home studio, which is wild in and of itself. Isn't
it crazy how our lives have verged and after merging for so long? You are, yes. Just to establish, you're in a little community up there in North Texas. I like to think of it as the far Houston suburbs, but you're north of Dallas now?
Far north. Yes, far north Houston. So I'm sort of between Dallas and Fort Worth, in that kind of pocket in between. It's a little sweet spot. The way I think of it is I'm 30 minutes into Dallas, 30 minutes into Fort Worth, and I opt in on occasion. But it's really kind of a deconstructed life up here, and it's quiet and simple and peaceful. And I don't miss Houston traffic one bit.
Well, it's only gotten worse in the last couple of years.
I know. I was just there. I was at your house.
Yes, I know. It's been crazy. So let's go back to the University of Houston. You were a communications major?
I was. Back then, it was considered a radio, television, film degree. And then I did a minor in journalism. But yes, it was all under the School of Communication.
So were you always a communicator, even as a kid? I mean, did you acting, debate, speech? What was your history to get you to a mass comm degree?
My history was that I love to talk a lot.
Well,
was my history.
That's a start.
No, actually, Frank, it's a great start. But I've got to share a story with you. And I think this was one of those pivotal moments that I didn't realize, but a friend in my life did realize. And we were 13 and a half, and her name was Crystal Calderoni. She was one of my best friends at the time. Her parents were really good friends with the Gatlin brothers. Remember them, the country group, Gatlin Brothers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we were invited to go with them to see Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 in Nashville, Tennessee, and Crystal could bring a friend, so she brought me. So we travel to Knoxville, we stay at the Gatlin Brothers' house. I mean, this is like surreal, okay? We take the tour bus over to Nashville. They've got floor seats for us. We're there listening to the concert. Crystal and I are dancing the whole way through, having the time of our lives. So at the end of the show, there was a reporter who was kind of making her way through the floor level. And she comes up on me and Crystal and she asks us, what we thought of the concert. And she went to Crystal first. And Crystal, who is normally very outgoing, talkative, expressive, was like, yeah, so the concert was great and we had fun and blah, blah, blah. So then the reporter asked me the question. And Frank, I kid you not, I don't remember doing this, but she said that I grabbed the microphone.
I believe it.
And I looked into the camera and I went on and I waxed poetic about Michael Jackson and his brothers and the songs and the dancing and the this and the that. And then I handed the mic back and Crystal looked at me and she said, I know what you're doing for a living. And I don't remember any of that. So I think, honestly, Frank, it's kind of in your DNA, this business, that if you're meant to do it, you have no shyness, you have no reservation, you just communicate.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Well, it certainly makes it easier if you have that in your DNA. So, all right, so you're at University of Houston, you get your degree. It was first radio for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was radio first, in fact, and I'm going to credit Dr. Bob Musburger, who was one of my professors there, who just had a big birthday, and all of us alums wished him a happy birthday via email, which goes to show the impact that professors can make long-lasting. I talk about him to this day because Dr. Bob helped me get my first job in radio. It was about 3 weeks after I'd graduated. And I would ask him every week, do you know of anything out there, any jobs? And he would tell me, well, this production company is looking for an editor, but I don't think that's what you're wanting to do. So 3 weeks after graduation, I reach out again. And he said, Metro Traffic has an opening. He said, it's part-time and it's weekends, but it's a traffic reporter. Would you be interested? I said, absolutely. So I go over to Metro and I interview. And as it turns out, the gentleman who was doing the hiring, his name was John Winder. He was also a U of H grad who also had Dr. Bob Musburger as a professor. So there immediately was that connection. And even though I had no experience broadcasting, I had that shared background. And so I got hired for the job and I was doing traffic reporting for KTRH and KLOL on the weekends while I was doing, temp work at law firms downtown and some acting and modeling and, whatever else came my way.
Yep. And then you end up at Channel 2. So I guess you were the morning traffic reporter, right?
I was. So there was a little stint in between Metro. I went over to Mix 96.5, which was one of the stations that I wound up doing traffic for. And I got hired over there as a part-time weekend disc jockey. Did some production work during the week, then got promoted to overnight disc jockey, then late night disc jockey. And while I was on that shift, I got a call from Neil Rohrig, who was doing traffic for Channel 2's morning show back then. Now, if you'll remember, Channel 2's morning show had 2 male anchors, a male weathercaster and a male doing the voice for traffic. There were no women. So Neil called me and he said, look, he said, they're looking to fill my position. They want a woman on camera to do traffic. He said they've looked at a lot of women, but none of them know traffic. He said, I remembered you expressing interest. Do you want to do it? Frank, I almost dropped my headphones. I was like, are you kidding me? Yes, yes, yes. So he called the news director at the time, Steve Ramsey.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Ramsey brought me in, interviewed me. They stuck me on the chroma key, as you well know. I had no chroma key experience at all, but at least I knew my freeways. So I'm like, I'm reaching behind and I'm trying to point and get my hand to touch the arrows, and it was tricky. You get it eventually.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I knew my freeways, and I got literally hired on the spot for that job, and that's how Channel 2 happened.
Yeah, and then of course Post Newsweek at the time, now Graham Media, bought it from the Hobbies in 1994. They hired me as the weatherman. That's when we met.
In 95, right? Or
yes.
94?
I came there in February 1st of 95. So we met each other. So you were still doing the morning traffic, but it wasn't long before you were the morning anchor, and then the 4 o'clock anchor, and then the 5, 6, the 10 anchor. I mean, you were anchoring all over the place. This must have been a dream come true. You know, people don't realize that Post Newsweek changed the television landscape in Houston. What you see today. Yeah, I mean, they came in, tighter shots on the anchors, scrolling information on the bottom of the screen, the big news center that they had built that we were in. I had Doppler 2000, and a 5-day went to a 7-day forecast before anyone in the market. They really were pioneers for the Houston market. And you and I and Bill Baeza were all so lucky to be a part of it. You know, I don't think we realized it. A lot of times we were kind of cynical, like, what are they going to do next? But looking back on it, what a joyous time and how fortunate we were.
Oh, Frank, we were so blessed. And you know what? I'm so glad you brought that up, because do you know who they modeled Channel 2 after?
I do.
It was WSVN in Miami.
Channel 7, yeah.
Channel 7 in Miami. And here's another... And again, this just goes to show how small this business is, another 6 degrees of separation. The news director at WSVN in Miami at the time was Joel Cheatwood.
Yep.
Joel. At the time that Channel 2 was interviewing me for Anchor for the morning show, Joel Cheatwood had contacted my agent and was interested in me for his morning show. So I'm like, look at the parallels. And I was born in Miami, even though I was raised in Houston. You know, our station is kind of becoming SVN. The current SVM news director is interested in me. And then to come full circle, what brought me up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area was Joel Cheatwood, who was head of news at Merritt Street. So it's just kind of surreal when you put all the pieces together. But blessed doesn't even begin to describe it. We were the cutting edge of what television news was becoming, and it was an interesting transition. It was at times an awkward transition. You were like, wait, they want us to do what? And the walking and the talking and you cropped here, and everything was tight and fast and crazy graphics and stuff. But it brought energy and this dynamic movement to what was considered kind of slow and stoic news.
But we got through it, and we continued.
We survived.
I know, and we watched it grow. We saw, so many stories. Of course, I remember all the weather stories, but we had a lot of the big news stories as we watched Houston grow from 95 to 2005, and then of course 2008 was big for the world. We had Hurricane Ike. And it came through, I know, and the economy all cratered all at the same time. Goldman Sachs went bankrupt, and Hurricane Ike came into Galveston. So I was
Frank, was Ike the hurricane where you were up in the chopper?
Yeah, yes.
I will. That is one of those memories that is so burned in my brain of just how compelling that coverage was. And I think it speaks to the fact of, and I have to brag on you, but it just speaks to your incredible knowledge of our community. You know, it's one thing to be a meteorologist and to know weather and patterns, but it is a whole other to know community the way you know Galveston. And putting you up in that chopper with the, what do you call that? The what was the camera called?
Oh, the Zoom cam. Zoom
cam that
yeah.
could spin around, do the 360, zoom in, really, really close. And there you were just talking to viewers live as it was happening. And they would say, oh, my house, you're on my street. Wait, go a little right, a little left. That's my house. And you could walk them through and you were telling everybody exactly where things were. And, that was the kind of television that made me feel so proud because I don't know about you, but to me, I always saw what we did as community service.
And it was,
we were there to serve people.
Yeah. And it was live reality TV before reality
Absolutely.
TV even existed because you just got the reactions of people. Now, we had a lot of opportunity with Channel 2 to take risks like that and do things a little differently. And so, yeah, it was great to be a part of that. But let's get back to you.
No, I like talking about you.
Thanks for the kudos. But no, it was great. But a lot of people don't realize that during that time, you and Bill and I and our spouses, we would have anchor dinners. We were truly friends. And you and Bill and I, almost every night after the 10 o'clock news, we would have a little powwow in the parking lot, like not near any cameras or microphones that could pick us up, and just talk about things. And I hardly remember anything we discussed, but we solved all the world's problems.
We saw in 30 minutes, people would think we were crazy. We would stand there. I mean, it's late at night. The news has buttoned up, it's 10:35. We're like packed up out the door. And there are the three of us just sort of standing in the parking lot, sometimes till 11 o'clock at night, figuring out, as you said, all the world's problems, deconstructing the day. I loved that time together. Yeah. It was sweet. It was intimate. It was fun. It was funny. It was insightful. But it was camaraderie. And I think, honestly, Frank, it was those moments that really forged such great friendships and that also kind of prompted and led to our little TV dinners, as you said, with our spouses and just to kind of bring them in on it and to continue it that way. And we would rotate and go from one house to another.
Yeah. Well, and I think it translated on air. I mean, I hear, Dream Team and people loved us and blah, 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 blah. They did or they didn't. But I think that if we had any chance to be a successful trio on the air, it was because we genuinely liked each other and respected each other. And I remember the funny, I don't know why I want to bring this up. I'll never forget. Bill, I would always try to make something funny at the end of the 10 o'clock news.
Yes.
And Bill said, that planet out there that is so bright, is that Venus? And I said, no, it's Jupiter, but he has Venus envy. And you just died laughing. I've never seen you laugh so hard on the air. And I don't know where I came up with that line, but it was priceless. It was a priceless line. But for us to get away with that kind of joking and no matter how edgy it got, it was always fun because, we liked each other, we knew each other, and we just really had a great time. All right, so I want to
sure, and to that point too, we would try to catch each other during commercial breaks because we'd get countdowns of when we're coming back on. And so Bill and I would always love to get each other's goat, like right at the end of a commercial break and say something to crack the other person up, to force composure, going into, and welcome back.
Bill would, he'd say something like, well, and now we're back. But we weren't back yet. All right, so let's get back to your career and the way I remember it. I remember a lot of women friends that I had would call me or email me and say, will you ask Dominique where she got that she's wearing? Or will you ask Dominique about her hair? Or will you ask Dominique about that? And I would, and you would graciously give me the answer and I'd pass it on. Did that happen enough so that about 2013, 14, you said, I could turn these tips that I'm giving Frank Billingsley for free into
make some money.
And make some money and have a YouTube channel and really be a guide for women, especially slightly older women, hearing it from someone their own age, and give guidance on hair and makeup and how to tie a scarf and that sort of thing. Did that what led to it?
Yeah, you're 100% right. It was honestly, and I've always leaned into it. The joke is that you could have a man and a woman telling the news, and the man will get complimented on, what a great news anchor he is and how informed he is, and the woman will get complimented on her hair and her outfit, right? And I never that's something that could frustrate you. But I think my nature was just to lean into it and to understand, look, this is a visual medium. And yes, women do get judged on the outside first. And then, hopefully you can get past that and realize that there's intellect and integrity and all the things that really, really matter. But I thought, why not press into this? This is what I'm getting asked so much of by, all kinds of women.
And so the Dominique Sachse YouTube era begins, right?
Yeah, it was 2014.
Yeah.
And it honestly, Frank, it started as literally taking my cell phone, doing a reverse camera kind of smoky eye tutorial. And I'll never forget, I did it and I posted it to KPRC's Facebook page. I didn't even have my own platform at the time. And the only thing I had been posting on our station Facebook page was either news stories or maybe, a photo of me and the dog or, an event or whatever. I had never done anything beauty related. And I posted it and I thought, OMG, what have I done? And then all of a sudden it just blew up. I had more views, more comments on that one post than anything I had ever posted. And a young millennial who had a very successful YouTube channel saw it, and she reached out to me and she was like, you need a YouTube channel. And I was like, a YouTube what? I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there were things like that out there.
They
for
were really
people.
new back then, right? I mean, they were barely
Very, very
on.
new.
Yeah, I mean,
it was very much a millennial-based thing to have beauty content out there. So as I started looking into it, I realized there were very, very few women. At that time, I was in my mid-40s. Very few women at that age in that space. And I thought, this might be a really neat opportunity. Instead of actually typing out how to do a smoky eye, I can show them.
Yeah,
and then I can show them this lipstick look or contouring or hair or whatever. And that birthed a YouTube channel.
So you went from sort of like a 1 minute, here's how to do a smoky eye, to really 30-minute shows on YouTube.
Yes. Yes. Long form.
So when did you hit I know you have 2 million viewers now. When did you hit your first million? About 2020?
Ooh, yeah, that feels about right.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there, about 2020. And then the other platforms really started growing as, beauty and fashion content kind of started blowing up on other social platforms. And then we started to take my YouTube videos and cut them down to like little bite-sized nuggets, I call them, like little 3-minute mini tutorials. And one of the agencies that reps me does that, and they post those videos on my Facebook page. And that really grew the numbers on Facebook to over 1 million now. And Instagram's almost at 700,000. And so it's like, they're finding you everywhere for different types of things. And it fascinates me.
And now you're podcasting.
Yeah. And now the podcast. And now the podcast for me, Frank, was really soul food because it allowed the journalist in me to come back. And there was a part of me that was missing that type of depth, meat. I love asking questions. I love interviewing people. I just do. But I want to do it on my terms. I want to interview people and provide content that's interesting to me and that I think is going to be interesting to my audience. So now I feel like I get the best of all worlds. I get to be the journalist. I get to provide content that is meaningful and useful and put it out there on my platforms. And I get to decide when I want to show up for work and when I want to shoot. And I'm not, beholden to anybody for a schedule or content or anything like that. So there's freedom in all of this. And that's the super cool thing about it.
And you're able to take cruises with your fans too. Tell me about those real quickly.
I travel with my people. It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, who knew? Who knew when it started with a reverse camera smoky eye tutorial that it would have led to all of this? Honestly, I mean, it's kind of wild if you think about it.
And the book that you have written, and I'm sure you are on the speakers circuit, going around the Dominique Sachse speaker circuit and talking to people and meeting them in person and live. Yeah, you really have carved out just sort of the perfect niche for a girl who grabbed the microphone and said, "Here's what Michael Jackson did tonight."
Exactly. Who knew that somebody who was trying to master the moonwalk,
right?
would be
So where do we go from here? I know you have a great life up there. You're happily married. Styles, your son, also a U of H Cougar graduate.
Yes,
he's doing well. I know how proud. We didn't really touch much on motherhood. I remember when he was just a dream, and you were hoping and trying and praying for a child, and you had Styles, and he's such a fine young man. You must be so proud.
Yep. Oh, Frank, I am over the moon. He is by far the best thing that has ever happened to me. Just watching him become a man, watching him mature. He calls me every day. He's such a mama's boy. I couldn't have asked for anything better. The other day, he was telling me about his HEB run and how much he's spent, and he's meal prepping, and he works out over at the wellness facility at U of H. And I mean, he's just so dialed in with being a good student and being a good citizen and just manning up in life. And it just makes my heart melt. It's not to say he doesn't have his moments where he drives his mother crazy, because yes, he's human, and so am I. But I'm so impressed, and I'm so excited for his future and excited for, what lies ahead for him. And I just want to be a part of every conversation about it.
And not to be maudlin, but your mother, who I adored, Audrey Toll, I mean, she was so proud of you. Every time I would see, and I would see her often because we would eat at Eloise Nichols, and she was walking across the street to come over. And I mean, the first thing she said was, "Dominique this, Dominique that." So she's up in heaven. But if I'm not mistaken, she had a martini in one hand and was flirting with a waiter at the same time. And so
no, let me correct you. It was a Prosecco in one hand, a piece of chocolate cake in front of her, and flirting with the waiter.
Yeah. So there are other ways to pass in life. And she was such a doll. And I think that probably you got so much of her spirit from your mom. I really think so. I think that
me too. And she loved you. Boy, did she love you.
Yeah. But she, I think she loved everybody a little bit. She was that kind. So, all right. So I got to wrap this up. Tell me, Dominique Sachse, where do we look for you as we go into the future?
Well, Frank Billingsley,
yes,
you can
ma'am.
continue to find me on Over 50 and Flourishing. That's my podcast. It's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. I still do my kind of what I call my traditional Thursday YouTube videos. That's the beauty, lifestyle, wellness. That content is still there. Social media. You find me at Dominique Sachse. I'm everywhere. I'm planning a podcast tour for 2026. I did one in 24. We are looking at no cities or dates set yet, but we're looking at Florida, Chicago, maybe Austin, definitely LA. Yeah, I mean, I've got some irons in the fire, and it's all good things.
Yeah, and when you get back here and you need a place to stay, just let me and Kevin know, and your guest room is ready.
Thank you. I loved our pajama party. That was so fun.
It's fun. Okay, Dominique Sachse, I love you. Thank you for being a friend of Frank, one of the best friends of Frank. And thanks for being here on Hello Houston News 88.7. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Great to see two of Houston's TV royalty together again. You just heard an interview with Frank Billingsley talking to former Houston news anchor Dominique Sachse. And today I'm actually sitting next to another former TV great.
Why, thank you. That's very kind of you.
Doug, you were on the air when, there was a lot of big names during that time.
Yeah, that was during that era when there were three, and Fox came along later, 4 English language television stations producing news. I was a newspaper reporter at one time, and I was just trying to decide, do I stay in the newspaper business? Do I go to television? And around that time, the Houston Post was about to fold, and I thought, there are 4 television stations, 1 news. That tells me which direction I need to go here. And it's curious. It's interesting hearing Dominique talk about it. Traffic reporting. That was my road in too. I was a student here at the University of Houston. Walked into the communications building one day, and there was literally a note tacked on the bulletin board saying that one of the traffic services was looking for a reporter. I was volunteering here at KUHF, the Houston Public Media radio station, back when I was in college. And I thought, well, I need the money. So I went over and tried out, and they said, sure, come on in. And I ended up on the airwaves here, and that's how my career in Houston broadcasting began.
That's incredible. I mean, is this kind of like a full circle moment? We just saw Frank Billingsley, Dominique Sachse, Doug Miller right here at UH. And Dominique was also a UH grad.
Yeah, it's interesting how much talent has come through this city. When I lived in the dorms here at U of H, on the floor upstairs from me lived Jim Nance, who was roommates with Fred Couples, who later became the great golfer. And they used to get in trouble for driving golf balls down the halls of Taub Hall. In fact, I almost got killed by Jim Nance because he drove a golf ball that almost hit me in the head. It was a good time to be in Houston.
And we did get a YouTube comment about Friends with Frank. We received one that says, wowza, Dominique is more than a pretty face. She is a grinder with grit. No wonder so successful. What a great role model. And you know what else is today? Today is Thursday, which means we already kind of teased it. Current obsessions. We heard yours.
Yeah, it's. I almost hate to admit this. People thought I was silly back when I was in television, but I did all these stories about bandit signs, and I just got so tired of these ugly-looking signs cluttering up neighborhoods, and it's still my strange obsession.
And we have received a couple of your obsessions. Let's see here. Any? Okay. David from Northwest Houston. My current obsession, gravity. I'm always dropping things, and it bugs me.
That's that's pretty zen, isn't it?
That one's not going away. I hate to break it to you, David. What else do we have here? My computer British guy says, oh, I forgot it was Thursday. Current obsession for me is the TV show From.
You know, it's interesting. People get together now, and they end up talking about what shows they are streaming on television. Because it used to be you just watch, you turn on the TV, and whatever was on, ER's on one channel, and there's something else on the other channel.
And everybody watched the same one.
And nobody knows what to watch now. It's like, you don't know which channel. Have you been watching? Yeah, I used to. Somebody told me about 6 months ago about Bosch, which has been off of Prime Video. It premiered like 10 years ago, and I've never seen the darn thing. So we have to trade advice on what television shows to watch now.
But it's interesting though, even though we're trading advice, there always is a trending topic or show happening.
Yeah, there's
right?
always a hot show.
Like White Lotus. I mean, I feel like everybody kind of gets behind one, and then all of a sudden it is a current obsession. So would you say Bosch is your current obsession right now?
Oh, I just finished up season 2. I'll start watching season 3 pretty soon. But I bounce all over the place.
I was going to say, I'm not really watching anything right now. I did watch over the holiday break. I don't know if I would say I'm obsessed with it, but I definitely feel like there's a lot of hype around it. Is One Battle After Another.
Oh, yeah.
Did you watch it?
I've seen it. I don't think it's Citizen Kane. It's an entertaining movie, but
interesting.
What did you think?
I thought it was good. I think I'm not a huge movie buff. Like I don't watch, but I thought it was very entertaining. It felt a little too topical. It was very just. Yeah.
Very on the nose.
Very on the nose.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of Oscar buzz about that movie.
Yes.
It's interesting. A few years ago when they changed the rules for voting for the Best Picture award, they got a ranked choice voting system. Used to be whoever got the most votes wins. There are 5 nominees. Boom. Well, now you have to get more than 50%, and if one movie doesn't get more than 50%, they do a point thing. And I don't know. They have shamans come in and shake sticks, and I have no idea how they figure this out. But the strangest movies win now. The one last year, Anora. I'm just kind of scratching my head over that.
Did you watch it?
I did, and I thought, well, that's an interesting art house movie, and it seems like these art house movies keep winning over and over again,
Well, that was one of my 2026 predictions on my bingo card was that One Battle After Another is going to sweep the Oscars.
All right. Well, we'll see.
We'll see. And one of the top trending items now on Google is the casting for the live-action Tangled film. Have you seen Tangled?
I have not seen Tangled, no.
Well, yeah.
I'll have to.
You'll definitely have to see it. But again, don't forget to send us your current obsessions. You can always call us or text 713-440-8870. And we love getting also emails from you all. Don't forget, talk@hellohouston.org. But you know what? We've run out of time, Doug.
I'm looking forward to something next week. On Monday night, the classic rivalry, Houston versus Pittsburgh. Texans playing the Steelers for the wild card. They're 4 games away from winning the Super Bowl. Okay, whatever.
That was Jim's bingo card. The Texans are going to win the Super Bowl. But again, we've run out of time, and that we've reached the end of our show. We want to thank you for watching and listening to Hello Houston. We will be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
The CEO behind the Taser promises a weapon that takes people down.
We hit them with the taser, and boom, down they would go.
But